over to House Hoops on X, which captured this moment. And Brianna Stewart is talking about that, among other things.
For me, it's like, this is the first time we're in a revenue shared model. So before it was like, we had like a hard cap and we had a structure and you could have 220 max and everything else kind of trickled down. You know, now we're going to like really blow that out of the water, which is incredible.
That acknowledgement right there is the most honest thing any player at the negotiating table has said publicly about the CBA standoff. Brianna Stewart just admitted what everyone has been thinking, but nobody wanted to say out loud. Only the top 10, maybe 15 players can afford to sit out the 2025 WNBA season. Everyone else needs that paycheck. They need it desperately. And yet, despite knowing this, despite understanding that her decision directly impacts women who don't have her endorsement deals or her unrivaled salary, she is still prepared to strike. So we have to ask the uncomfortable question: is this negotiation really about what's fair for all players, or is it about what the elite tier wants?
We've also talked about the conflict of interest, which really does figure into all of this. You have a Brianna Stewart and a Napheesa Collier who own a different league, yet they're the ones negotiating there. Particularly Napheesa Collier, she's the one who's been out there. She's been talking a whole lot. And meanwhile, they're okay because they have a whole different league. And then Project B came along, and then Project B would be at the same time as a rival. So not quite sure how that's all going to work out. It's just a very convoluted type mess.
Here's the context that makes this whole situation even messier. The conflict of interest Adrian Ross mentions isn't theoretical. Brianna Stewart and Napheesa Collier literally own Unrivaled, a competing 3-on-3 league that just completed its first season. They're sitting at the WNBA negotiating table while simultaneously running a rival basketball operation. Now add in Project B, another international league launching soon, and you've got a situation where the loudest voices pushing for a potential strike are the same voices with the biggest financial cushion to weather it. They've got ownership stakes, they've got endorsements, they've got options. The majority of WNBA players? They've got a lease payment due in April and no backup plan.
Personally, as WNBA players, it's like, well, we've signed however many CBA deals before, and we just don't want to get gypped. We don't want to feel like we're signing something and we're actually getting like screwed, because now we know how much you need us. We see the valuations between all the teams and all the things and the expansion fees, and it's like, no, there's a lot of money behind this, so like, don't forget to pay us too. So it's just really a back and forth battle.
Would you say y'all are prepared not to play this season? I know you want to, but would you say you're prepared not to play?
We've approved the strike authorization vote, which means that we're able to formally lock out whenever we want because we have majority of the players' votes behind us.
Let's talk about what's actually on the table, because this is where Stewart's claim about being gypped starts to fall apart. The leaked proposal that surfaced last week shows the WNBA offering a revenue-sharing model for the first time in league history. We're talking about moving past the old hard cap structure, where max contracts topped out at $220,000. The new proposal would tie player compensation directly to league revenue growth, meaning as the WNBA makes more money, players automatically make more money. That's not getting gypped. That's literally what players have been asking for since the league started. But here's where it gets complicated. Stewart mentions seeing the expansion fees and team valuations, and she's right to point those out. The Golden State Valkyries paid $50 million for their expansion slot. Existing teams are being valued at over $100 million each. There's real money flowing into this league now. The question isn't whether players deserve more. The question is whether the specific percentage they're demanding is realistic for a league that, according to NBA Commissioner Adam Silver's own admission, has operated at a loss for most of its existence.
I think that for me personally, like the closer it gets to WNBA season, we're prepared to do it, to not play, but we don't want to. We want to play because we know how important it is to be on the court for a number of reasons, for the people, for the fans, for the city. But it'll be something that's really tough if push comes to shove, because, you know, like you said, you're comparing apples to oranges. The W and the NBA, like, contracts are vastly different.
Very skewed, yeah.
So it's like, yeah, the top 10, maybe 15 players can survive without a W contract.
Right.
But the rest, it's like, no, you don't want to go that much without getting paid.
That strike authorization vote Stewart mentions passed with overwhelming support from the players' union. But here's what's been reported behind the scenes. There's growing friction within that union. Multiple sources have indicated that not all players are on board with the hardline stance. Some veterans, who don't have unrivaled contracts or major endorsement deals, are reportedly pushing to accept the current offer and move forward. They're looking at the calendar, seeing it's already February and recognizing that training camps are supposed to start in April. They're doing the math on their bank accounts and realizing they can't afford to miss paychecks. But those voices aren't the ones controlling the narrative. The Players Association is dominated by stars who have the luxury of being able to wait this out, and that creates a fundamental power imbalance within the union itself. When Natasha Cloud says accepting the deal would be stupid, she's speaking from a position of financial security that most of her union sisters don't share.
Doing a great job of making sure that we have like the amenities and the resources, and if we don't get what we want, we will sit out, but we don't want to do that.
So a few takeaways from what Brianna Stewart said. Number one, she said, we see how much y'all need us. Now, some people might strongly disagree with that. Are you really needed? Number two, she said, we don't want to be gypped. Now, I showed the numbers from the leaked proposal, proposal last night. We've talked about numbers a number of times. I don't know how you can look at those numbers and feel that you're being gypped. And a lot of people feel the same way. Gypped? Interesting word for those numbers. Number three, she acknowledges that there are players who need.
Now here's the part that should concern everyone who cares about women's basketball. Stewart says they don't want to strike, but they will if they don't get what they want. That's the key phrase. What they want, not what they need, not what's fair, what they want. And the timing of this potential strike couldn't be worse for the league's momentum. The WNBA just came off its most successful season in history. Caitlin Clark's rookie year drove television ratings up 48% compared to 2023. The league averaged 1.22 million viewers for nationally televised games, with some matchups breaking 3 million. Attendance was up across the board. Merchandise sales exploded. Corporate sponsors who ignored women's basketball for decades were suddenly fighting for partnership deals. This was the breakthrough moment the WNBA had been working toward for 28 years. And now there's a real possibility that the 2025 season doesn't happen, that all that momentum, all that newfound mainstream attention, all those casual fans who just started paying attention disappear. Because once you lose momentum in professional sports, you don't get it back easily.
The money, and only maybe the top 10 or 15 are not in that category. She understands that. Number four, yes, they understand that, but they are still prepared to strike nonetheless. And they will. 5, if they don't get what they want, she said. So no, Brianna Stewart is not tone deaf. She is not lacking in understanding that this decision is a huge one that affects some people, most people, more than others. Others who own different leagues or who are playing in different leagues, who have money from endorsements, and whatever, the top players, they are not going to probably lose much sleep now over this decision if they choose not to play. Now, I say now because it would be a colossal mistake if they ruin this moment. And I think it will come back.
Let's be clear about what Stewart is comparing here when she talks about the difference between WNBA and NBA contracts. She's right that they're vastly different. An NBA rookie on a minimum contract makes over $1 million. The WNBA maximum salary in 2024 was $241,000. That gap is enormous, and it's legitimate to want to close it. But here's the economic reality that doesn't change just because players want it to change. The WNBA generated roughly $200 million in revenue in 2024. The NBA generated $10 billion. That's not a typo. $10 billion with a B. That's 50 times more revenue. The NBA can pay minimum contracts of $1 million because it generates the revenue to support it. The WNBA is still building toward that level of financial sustainability. The revenue-sharing model being proposed would actually position WNBA players to benefit massively if the league continues its current growth trajectory. If revenue doubles over the next 5 years, which is entirely possible given the momentum from this past season, player salaries would double automatically. That's a better deal than locking in specific numbers that might look good today but become outdated quickly. But it requires players to trust that the league will continue growing, and based on Stewart's comments, that trust isn't there.
At some point, if they strike, say, what in the world are we doing? And then, of course, you've got the players who would be seriously impacted by it. And I feel sure that they're saying, look, it is February. We got to start making moves and doing things. This is more money than I've ever seen. Let's rock and roll. So she's not tone deaf. She understands it. But at the end of the day, although she sounds conflicted, I'll give her that. At the end of the day, she's still saying, if we don't get what we want, despite those for whom that would be devastating, we're still going to strike. We got to get what we want. So if you've been wondering if she's considered other people, well, the answer is yes. Now, if you've been wondering, does she care in the sense of letting that affect their decision? Well, according to her own words, no, not that much. They still want what they want. So they're not ignorant. They're just not willing to budge, based on what she said.
So here's where we are. It's February 2025. Training camps are supposed to start in roughly 8 weeks. The WNBA has offered a historic revenue-sharing agreement that would, for the first time ever, tie player compensation directly to league growth. The offer includes significant increases to minimum salaries, improved benefits, better travel accommodations, and a structure that rewards players as the league succeeds. By any objective measure, this is the best deal WNBA players have ever been offered, and yet, the Players Association is prepared to reject it and strike. Not because the offer is unfair, not because it doesn't represent real progress, but because the top tier of players, the ones with the loudest voices and the most financial security, want more. They want a bigger percentage of revenue. They want guarantees that may not be economically feasible for a league that is still establishing its profitability. They want to be paid like NBA players while working in a league that generates a fraction of NBA revenue. Brianna Stewart isn't tone deaf. She clearly understands that most players can't afford to miss a season. She acknowledged that directly in the interview. But understanding something and letting it influence your decision are two very different things, and based on her own words, that understanding isn't translating into action. The strike authorization vote passed. The hardline stance continues. And the players who would be hurt most by a work stoppage, the ones without unrivaled contracts or endorsement portfolios, aren't the ones making the final call. Adrian Ross is right to point out that Stewart and the other negotiators will eventually regret this if they let it go too far. This is the WNBA's moment. This is when casual sports fans are actually paying attention. This is when corporate America is finally taking women's basketball seriously. This is when television networks are bidding against each other for broadcast rights. Throwing all of that away because you want a slightly higher percentage of revenue sharing would be one of the biggest strategic mistakes in professional sports history. The players have leverage right now, real leverage, the kind that comes from genuine public interest and growing commercial value. But leverage is temporary. It exists in a moment, and if you don't use it wisely, it disappears. Ask any athlete who's lived through a prolonged work stoppage. Ask NHL players what happened to their sports popularity after the 2004 to 2005 lockout wiped out an entire season. It took years to rebuild what was lost, and some markets never fully recovered. The WNBA doesn't have the established fan base to survive that kind of disruption. This league is still building its audience. Those 1.2 million average viewers aren't diehard fans who will wait patiently through a labor dispute. They're casual viewers who started watching because Caitlin Clark was fun to watch, because the games were competitive, because it felt new and exciting. Make them wait a year for the next game, and a significant percentage of them won't come back. They'll move on to something else. That's just how casual sports viewership works. And here's the cruelest irony in all of this. The players who would be hurt most by losing that momentum are the same players who can least afford to miss paychecks during a strike. The stars will be fine. Brianna Stewart will be fine. She has Unrivaled. She has Puma. She has enough endorsement money to weather any storm. But the role players, the bench players, the women who make up the majority of WNBA rosters, they need this season to happen. They need the league to keep growing. They need the momentum to continue so future CBA negotiations happen from an even stronger position. Instead, they're being asked to sacrifice their immediate financial security so the top tier can push for maximum gains right now. That's not solidarity. That's not what a union is supposed to do. A union exists to protect all its members, especially the most vulnerable ones. But this negotiation is being driven by the players who are least vulnerable, the ones who have the luxury of waiting, the ones who won't miss a mortgage payment if the season gets canceled. Stewart says the Players Association is doing a great job of making sure they have amenities and resources if they strike. But amenities and resources don't pay rent. They don't cover childcare. They don't replace a $50,000 salary for a player who is counting on that money to support her family. The Players Association can offer all the moral support in the world, but it can't replace lost income for women living paycheck to paycheck. So what happens next? Based on Stewart's comments, the players are dug in. They've authorized a strike. They're prepared to sit out if they don't get what they want. The league has made what it considers a fair offer, one that represents historic progress for player compensation. Neither side appears ready to blink, and the clock is ticking toward April. The smart play would be for the Players Association to accept the current offer, lock in the revenue-sharing model, and use the next CBA negotiation to push for an even bigger percentage. Build on success rather than risking everything for marginal gains right now. But that would require the players driving this negotiation to prioritize the collective good over their personal desire to maximize leverage in this specific moment. And based on everything we've seen, that's not the calculation being made. Brianna Stewart understands the stakes. She said so herself. She knows most players can't afford to strike. She knows this moment is crucial for the league's future. She knows the momentum could be lost. And she's still prepared to let it happen if the players don't get exactly what they want. That's not leadership. That's privilege masquerading as principle. If this negotiation ends with a canceled season, lost momentum, and casual fans moving on to other sports, history won't remember the percentage points being fought over. History will remember that the WNBA had its moment, and the players chose to walk away from it. So here's the question you need to answer in the comments. Are the players right to hold firm and risk the season, or should they take the historic deal on the table and build from there? Because one way or another, this decision is going to define the WNBA's future for the next decade.